there are, well, I want to stop for a second. For those of you who are watching the recording of this or who are here for the first time, the Local Summit is an organization that brings together community organizations to discuss topics of local concern. We've discussed issues such as flooding, such as safety, such as scams, such as the services that are available to the community. So we encourage you to come to our meetings, which are held on the second Tuesday of the month here at 8 a.m. at the Nautilus Diner. We thank the Nautilus Diner for hosting us and for LMC for broadcasting these meetings. And with that, I want to turn it to all of you to see if there are any community announcements. Yes, Ann McAndrews. Here, microphone, so people can hear you.
Good morning, all. I put some announcements, some flyers on the table, and this is a program that's rather unusual for the League of Women Voters to be involved with. First of all, there will be no timekeeper. No one will be standing up and saying, stop. It is Experience the Art of Democracy, which is kind of interesting. How are the challenges to our democracy expressed through art? This is a program that is sponsored by MAG, as you know, the Mamaroneck Artists Guild, and Arts Westchester. And that's when my Boston accent comes out, I guess. So, very simply, it's going to be on Saturday, October 11th. That's a Saturday, from 1 to 4 on Palmer Avenue. Please consider it, and we have some more announcements, some more flyers to hand out if necessary. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. Any other announcements? Yes, I see a hand back there. I'll bring you the microphone so everybody hears you.
I've said this before, but you'll hear me again. I'm from At Home on the Sound, and I see a lot of retired people here. We desperately need some more drivers. It's a wonderful opportunity. You meet great people. You drive them to, you can do it once a month. You can do it once a week. Whatever you feel is appropriate. But please sign up. 899-3150. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have an announcement, but I wanted to personally thank Shelley for the grant that she got us for the Larchmont Public Library. We just got our money, and we have a new beautiful roof. Thanks to her, we really appreciate all your support over the years.
Thank you, and that's a good segue. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Peggy Jackson and Senator Mayer. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. There's really nothing for me to say other than thank you, Shelley, for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to our state senator.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to stand. And if everyone had the traffic problems I did, I felt terrible. I was like texting furiously, how do I get over there at 8 o'clock? So thank you. And secondly, thank you for inviting me. When I first had the really distinct honor of representing this community, thanks to George, who brought me here early in my efforts to run for this seat, I said every community should have this idea of a available place where people can go listen and engage in conversation, ask hard questions. I wish every community had a summit like this. This is really a fantastic thing. So thank you, Peggy, Lane, Raina. Thank you all. I see so many of my elected official colleagues here, all of whom I'm very honored to work closely with. And I'm missing Steve Otis. He is my partner in most things, Larchmont Mamaroneck. He is in Binghamton on the way to a conference that he could not reschedule, and we agreed I would do this alone. But if I leave things out that he knows better than me, you'll excuse me. And secondly, I just want to say that This is a trying time, not only to be an elected official, but for us generally. Here we worked hard on a state budget, which I'm going to talk about what we did legislatively between January and June. And then came this so-called big, beautiful big bill, big ugly bill. And it really, as we anticipated, changed the future of what we are going to face. So I'm going to sort of do two segments, a little bit about what we did in Albany between January and June, a little bit about what this bill we think will mean for New York and for our communities, and then thirdly, sort of how we're going to deal with these challenges that we face. So, and then I'm going to have questions because there will be time for questions. So I am very honored to be the chair of the Education Committee. Some of you may know that. That's something I've had since we've been in the Senate minority and then majority. I'm a true believer that public schools are the path to the middle class for so many communities. And here in Westchester, people move here because of our quality public schools. So we've continued the fight to adequately fund public schools. And I always say this is not only for people who have kids in schools or kids in public schools, because your house value, your community value, and frankly, sort of our American democratic value, in my opinion, is very much based on having this common school tradition of the best. It's not always the best. The NAEP scores came out today, for those of you who follow that, and they're not very good. That is a challenge for us to get our scores better nationally. But just a bit of context. In 2007, the state adopted a better, less politically driven standard for how public schools should be funded by the state, to be based on income, English language learners, special needs, all the categories. But it took us from 2007 till 2021 to get governors to agree to pay it. Governor Cuomo said it was irrelevant. We had a long fight with him. We ultimately won, and the money got paid. Some schools are still owed the money. Mamaroneck Public Schools were still owed foundation aid. Those schools that were owed foundation aid got additional aid this year, and we revamped the formula to improve the situation for Westchester schools by changing what's called the regional cost index, which is how much it costs sort of to hire staff in Westchester. We were lumped with upstate New York. We got that changed to be closer to Long Island and New York City. And we also have a higher weighting for English language learners, which is relevant to Mamaroneck and many of the schools in Westchester. So Westchester, Mamaroneck got a 9.7 increase in foundation aid. That their total amount from the state is $8.7 million in foundation aid. So as much as you're paying high taxes for your schools, the state is also very invested in Mamaroneck. We also added money statewide. You know, we enacted the bell-to-bell cell phone ban, and unfortunately I was there to see sort of the trauma at one school where they literally gave the phone over to put in a pouch, and there were close to tears by some high school students. But that being said, I think this is the first step in our efforts, really, and credit to the governor, although I disagree with certain parts of this bill, to move to diminishing the use of social media in school, making teachers free from having to constantly tell the kid to stop looking down, and also, more important from my perspective, to engage in social interaction and get free of the failure to talk to other students. And that's why it applies at lunch and study hall and all those things. It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy road, but I'm confident we will get there. We also approved statewide universal free breakfast and lunch for every student in the state. This was a long fight. I'm very happy we won. Not every school has adopted it. But this is, in addition to those of us who are old and remember sort of two lines, those that had money and those that didn't, this is also an effort, again, to build social interaction. Everyone is going to be the same. They're all going to sit together, and breakfast is included. There's seats here. There's seats. Please come in. So we worked on that. For those that have BOCES, I know Mamaroneck is not in BOCES, but BOCES is still a path for career and technical education, something I'm very invested in. We did finally increase the salary cap so that we can hire more professional people for BOCES, which is very important, and also for special ed. We increased SUNY and CUNY capital funding. Still is at Westchester Community College, is a school of choice for many Westchester High School seniors. It's affordable, it's close, and you get 2 years and then you can transfer. We increased operating aid to community colleges. In healthcare, particularly relevant because of what happened in the bill, we increased Medicaid rates, not as much as hospitals wanted, but we increased hospitals, nursing homes, assisted living, federally qualified health centers, and safety net and distressed hospitals. Child care. Westchester has, and most of the state has, an excellent program that we're subsidizing child care for lower income people. That may mean, I know somebody who just was waiting to get into their job and get paid. In the interim, she needed child care in order to prepare. This child care is highly subsidized by the state and the county. Westchester truly benefits by this. We added $440 million statewide. That was a fight at the end of the budget to get more child care. If you are like me, was a working mother for many years, we are really behind the rest of the world in subsidizing child care, and every mother is not home when school is over, and also for younger children and infants, we actually have to invest in it. We finally added more for roads, not enough for our community, in my opinion. We are underserved by the distribution of funds statewide, but we are fighting with the Department of Transportation and the governor's office to get more money. Yesterday, you may have seen the Solomon River Parkway was closed because of a dip, whatever the fancy word for it is. We can't have that in our society and certainly in our region, so we're going to continue to fix. On the MTA, they enacted the congestion pricing, which we had voted for with some changes. We did something that I think is important for local businesses. We reduced the MTA payroll tax for businesses that have payrolls under 1.75 million. I always thought it was unfair that the person who does my hair or your hair or whatever has a little business here and really has very little to do with the MTA was paying a substantial amount to the MTA payroll tax. We really moved it to the large companies that benefit largely by the MTA. We all benefit by being in the MTA region, but it was an undue burden on small businesses. We reduced that. And the other big thing we did was we finally paid off the unemployment insurance fund debt, $8 billion we owed back to the federal government because of unemployment during COVID. And that was resting on small businesses whose premiums for unemployment insurance were going up. I am always worried, and you have done a fantastic job here of supporting small businesses. In fact, I just called HIMAT to try to do something there. Great little small business here. But this fund of $8 billion we took out of a sort of money that the governor had set aside. There's enough to pay that back, so we paid it back. In the energy and environment, the governor set in the budget a $1 billion sustainable futures fund without a lot of specificity of where the money would go, but it gives us the opportunity to direct money towards environmental projects that are worthy. We're going to do some at SUNY Purchase, which happens to be something that I care about, but there's clean green schools money in there, zero emission vehicle charging facilities. The state needs to invest substantially, and we did. In reproductive and maternal health care, again, I raise it because it's changed by what happened in the bill. We invested additionally in abortion training for physicians and the coverage of abortion costs for those who cannot pay for the cost. I'm proud to have been the sponsor of the telemedicine shield law in New York, which allows millions, frankly, not millions, maybe hundreds of thousands of women outside New York to benefit by licensed New York providers sending medication abortion upon a consultation to a woman in another state. I want to talk a little bit about what Steve and I have done together from Mamaroneck. We have fought to add money to the Army Corps project so it doesn't get stalled, which it has been stalled, and I don't know if Sharon is here, but we're pushing ahead, and each of us got our houses to put millions of dollars into the pot so they didn't come back at the end and say, oh, the state didn't do their share. We assisted in trying to help both the town and the village get additional grant money for flooding. Steve and I both have pushed, and not successful so far, for a cabinet-level Office of Flood Management with funding. This came out of the Ida experience here. We simply can't have municipalities sort of climbing all over each other, trying to figure out who to call to get money, people to figuring out who to call. We need a high-level, coordinated Office of Flood Management in New York. My bill passed the Senate, but it hasn't passed in the Assembly. Of the capital that is given to me, that is money that Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins gives to each person to give out. I've given $400,000 to electrical upgrades from Mamaroneck High School to expand air conditioning at parents' request. $100,000 to the Village of Mamaroneck EMS for a new ambulance. $80,000 for the American Legion Post 90, which is stalled, unfortunately, to redo the stairs to make it handicapped accessible. $100,000 for outfitted motorcycles for the Larchmont Police Department. $100,000 to help rebuild the Community Resource Center after the flood. And then in operating, we've given the Community Resource Center another $35,000, and the Mamaroneck Community Chorus $15,000. Quite a wonderful thing. The Mamaroneck Public, the Larchmont Library, and we will continue to support every library. So I have really the luxury and the honor of being able to distribute this money the best I can, and these communities are extremely important to me personally. We did do a bill for the Mamaroneck Public Library. Some of you remember the sort of tumultuous days of the Mamaroneck Public Library. The board asked us to change the law, it's governed by state law, to allow flexibility to determine the number of trustees between 5 and 15. We're working with the Village of Mamaroneck on the road safety issues after the terrible death last year. I work every 2 months with all groups that serve the immigrant community. I have a regular call to make sure that both legislatively and policy-wise, I know what issues they're facing. So obviously CRC, but throughout Westchester, all the groups, I get together with them, and I will continue to do that. We're working with DOT, the Department of Transportation, on the complete streets redesign of Route 1 on the Boston Post Road. We've had 2 meetings with parents from the school district as well as others to make sure that the community voice is heard. With Steve, I co-lead the Save the Sound briefing, which is to bring legislators from everyone who borders the Sound, not only Long Island, but some of our New York City colleagues, to have a true bicameral Senate and Assembly bipartisan coalition to address sound issues. And Con Ed, you may know, I've been leading the fight against the Con Ed rate increase. I'll talk a little bit about that. I am a staunch opponent of the Public Service Commission's approach to utility rates. I've done 4 major bills to change the way the rates are set. I think that ratepayers are second to shareholders in the way they do it, and they defer to these companies, and it's an insider's game. Thank you to all the municipalities for intervening in this action. We got the County Board of Legislators. 41 out of 42 municipalities in Westchester have intervened to be parties in the challenge to Con Ed's proposed rate increase. And this last week, I authored a letter to the Department of Financial Services opposing the proposed 18% increase for Medicare Part B premiums from United. I think, and this is not partisan, we got to talk about what it costs to live here, what it costs to live in New York, and we got to fight, including fighting the governor's agencies and Democratic officials. We have to fight for much greater recognition of the burdens that people are feeling, and I'm very prepared to do that, and I'll continue to do it. So now what happened? So then, once Trump got elected, we knew they were going to do a bill, but we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, and we didn't know the impact. And we also did not want to say, do whatever you want, we can backfill everything, because we cannot backfill everything, and we are not prepared to backfill every cut that has been made. But I'm going to switch a little into what the impact of the bill and some of the other Trump administrative decisions will be, in my opinion, on us. So the biggest is the Medicaid change. And the Medicaid change, just in my district alone, so the 37th Senate District, 30,000 people are on Medicaid. That's 30,000. 10,000 of them are children. So 10,000 children on Medicaid in my district alone. In George's district, obviously a bigger district, 5,264 people are at risk of losing coverage altogether, and hospitals in his district, which overlaps quite a bit with me, although he has a little bit of the Bronx, could lose up to $32 million. The Medicaid cuts are very significant. The first is the essential plan. That is the plan that the state offers, sort of the Obamacare type of plan. They are basically saying that lawfully present immigrants, people who are entitled to be here, which we have covered, so they have Medicaid so that when they go to the hospital or healthcare provider, their costs are covered. They are no longer in the Medicaid program. So that cuts a whole lot of people, including in our communities here, out of Medicaid. Secondly, they impose on the state many more requirements for everyone on Medicaid, which is going to require the state to basically hire a whole lot of people and spend a lot of time on ensuring eligibility. It's going to have more frequent eligibility checks and more requirement of the state's share to be paid. So this is likely to result in over 730,000 people losing essential plan coverage starting in 2026. You know, they made it sound like it was after the next midterm, but the essential plan changes occur in 2026, so it's not far off. There are $7.5 billion in lost federal funding. This is just in New York. There's new costs of $2.7 billion to the state for the requirements of the state. And there's a shift. These people that are knocked off the essential plan are either going to be uninsured or try to get on Medicaid, but most of that will not be covered by federal dollars. And our hospitals, nursing homes are going to lose substantially because they're, as you know, nursing homes are pretty much entirely dependent on Medicaid as a payer. So the impact of the Medicaid cuts is going to cause the state to have to figure out what to do. Again, we cannot tax our way to cover all this, and we cannot cover everything that they are going to refuse to cover, and we cannot get the money to pay for the additional costs. So we gave the governor authority to deal with $750 million in cuts before the next fiscal year by taking money out of the reserves. So far we haven't had to deal with it, but we're going to go back in January and have to deal with it. And how we're going to deal with it exactly, I don't know. There is a movement by some people, no surprise, to increase taxes. There is a movement by other people to cut costs more. These are the challenges we're going to face. The other thing I want to talk about is SNAP, what used to be called food stamps. Very substantial changes in eligibility and in cost. It used to be that basically the feds picked up the cost of SNAP, and now there's going to be a share that the state must bear, plus more frequent, again, checking in to ensure eligibility. And while it's said that this is to deal with waste, fraud, and abuse, it really will knock people off. And the goal is to lessen the number of people on these programs. SNAP, in addition to really hurting our neighbors who are dependent, and like Feeding Westchester, which helps with the Larchmont Mamaroneck food distribution there. The other problem with the SNAP cut is our local small businesses that actually, for example, sell food using SNAP benefits are going to be hurt. Fewer people are going to have the certificates to buy SNAP, and the state will pay a significant amount of money. So those are two things. I want to mention a few others. FEMA, only because we lived and died with FEMA here during Ida, and they did play an instrumental role, and they came, you remember them being outside the village hall. You know, the president has sort of suggested that reduce or or minimize FEMA altogether. I think that for communities like ours, that is a very substantial threat. Abortion and Planned Parenthood. They basically passed in the bill, no money can go to a provider, not for abortion, but for any other services if basically they're Planned Parenthood. So right now, if you go to Planned Parenthood for birth control, which used to be covered by Medicaid, which used to be half and half state and federal, they cannot bill Medicaid. We just went on a tour. They cannot bill Medicaid for anything. Planned Parenthood is out of the Medicaid business. There's court litigation about it, but in the interim, this is going to directly impact really young women's access to health care, mostly women. On climate, the bill removes almost all the money-saving tax credits for modern energy sources, wind and solar. The president is very opposed to wind particularly. And they're taking away some of the tax credits for buying electric vehicles. On higher education, in addition to dismantling the U.S. Department of Education, which is a place that schools get Title I funding, which is for schools with high need. Almost all of our districts get it. Also, it is a place you could go and complain if you had a problem with discrimination towards your child. That is going to be moved probably to the Department of Justice. I think that, for me, the dismantling of a federal Department of Education is a sign that it no longer is important in the federal scheme of things, and I think that's extremely troubling. I have some other bad things to say. There's really quite a bit there. I just want to look at my time. So what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to deal with it? I mentioned financially, I think the future is unclear. We do have a significant amount in reserves, but we used a lot. Like last year, we used all that money for the unemployment fund. Those were wise decisions. But now what are we going to do? So that's part one. Part two, what are we going to do about immigration enforcement issues? So I am a co-sponsor of New York for All. That is a bill that sort of applies what we have in Westchester in the Immigrant Protection Act to the state, which means that ICE has to have a judicial warrant as opposed to just somebody signing their name. My people who don't want to do it say, but it doesn't matter. You already passed it, and they're doing it anyway. It's passed in New York City, they're doing it anyway. They're going to do whatever they want, and there's nothing you can do with state law to change it. I don't quite buy that. I think we need to do some things about immigration. It's really damaging our communities, like here, and the other communities I represent, by their incredibly aggressive and I think unconstitutional ways of picking up people, threatening businesses, threatening our schools. So I have a number of suggestions of things I want. I'm going to be introducing a bill, like one that was just signed in Illinois, that requires schools to have a much more detailed plan of what they're going to do when ICE comes. I happen to think schools, churches, synagogues, houses of worship should be off limits. I don't think I'm going to win on that, but I'm going to continue to fight for that. And the other thing on immigration is I am a co-sponsor of the bill to ban the use of masks and failure to disclose identity. To me, that's profoundly anti-American. I know there's a supremacy clause, I'm very aware of that, but I think we should do some things. And I think if the world doesn't end, if we get sued, and the world doesn't end if not everybody agrees, I think we're at a moment of a greater crisis than just sitting back and waiting for things to unfold. So I'm in favor of doing more, both on immigration, on education, on the way that ICE agents appear in our community, and also in trying to ensure that our neighbors, particularly our Latino neighbors, feel secure in our communities where they have lived and worked for a long time. So I'm in favor of doing more. There's not a consensus about going back before January. So far, we have not been called back. Again, I'm in favor of going back, but I'm one of a group, and I'm not. If you're not, if you don't like group work, you shouldn't be in the legislature, because it's, otherwise run for governor, because there's, you're not in control. You work with your colleagues, and I work very well with my colleagues. Two other issues I want to mention short term. One is vaccines. So the Secretary Kennedy's change on COVID vaccine availability, particularly for those over 65 and those with health conditions, automatically triggered lots of calls to my office. People who wanted to get it. If you went on CVS's website, the next day it was not available in New York without a doctor's prescription, as it was during COVID. You could just go and make an appointment to get the vaccine. Credit to the governor. She issued an executive order that for a short period of time, hopefully some things get resolved, pharmacists have a authority to give the vaccine and protect their license. Some of them are worried, and doctors can give non-patient specific orders. So your doctor can say, everyone I see, I'm giving you a prescription without your name on it. And so then when you go to your pharmacy, you say, look, my doctor gave me an order and I can get it. It's not clear that insurance will cover it all, and that's a problem issue, in my opinion, that we haven't resolved. The other thing I just want to mention is redistricting, and then I'll move to questions. Is that okay? Once Texas redistricted at the president's request, which is contrary to both the norm and in most places the law about doing it only after a census every 10 years, and we went through a tumultuous redistricting, and that's why my district now goes all the way to Pound Ridge. And when it used to go to Bedford, now it cuts Bedford out and goes around to Pound Ridge, because the guy didn't know the difference between Northern Westchester, in my opinion. But it doesn't matter. It's a lovely place to visit and to represent. But New York's Constitution, as opposed to Texas, has provisions about redistricting. So we could not, if we wanted to, which I think we should, change redistricting because Texas did, not any other reason. We cannot do it without changing the New York State Constitution. To change the New York State Constitution, two separate legislative bodies have to pass a resolution twice, and then it goes to the people. So we could do it next year, and then the following year when we have a different legislature, because we have elections next year, we would pass it again. It would go to the voters in November of 2027, and it would not be effective until 2028 election. It still is a possibility. I happen to be on that bill. I'm a co-sponsor. I believe we should do it. But just so people don't have the impression, we in New York, unless someone disagrees legally, and I haven't seen very good analysis, cannot do redistricting prior to the 2028 midterm or election. And, we have not discussed this as a group. I do not know where all my colleagues stand. I think the governor's indicated she would not have to sign it, though. It's not a bill. It's a concurrent resolution. So let's see what happens. Lastly, I just want to say that it truly is an honor to have this job. It is a tough time to be an elected politician or elected office. As you know, I'm close to George. We both get our share of sort of ugliness. I think ugliness has become sort of an accepted way to disagree. That's not my way. That's not how I believe. I believe in our democracy, but I just think the tone of the current discourse is quite unacceptable. I appreciate the opportunity, like I had a town hall in Mamaroneck. People disagreed with me. It was very civil. I just am deeply offended by the tone, frankly, that this president has allowed to come out. And I do my best to push back against it in all the settings that I can, because I think we'll do fine if we can agree on 60% of things and we agree on 70% of things. We do not have to agree on everything, and we can hold strong views and disagree and still try. I just would say I invited my neighbors, most of whom do not support my party, to my house because I said I don't know my neighbors well enough anymore. And we came, we had a lovely time. No one talked politics. It was perfect. But my only point is we have to move away from this, and I know most people have here in this setting, move away from this very, very divisive way of doing politics. And I really do lay it on them because I think in balance, this president has allowed that kind of language. and open hatred to occur, and I am deeply offended by it as a sort of patriotic American. Happy to take questions.
I'm going to run the mic around.
Thank you so much, Shelley, for all your leadership on all these things. In particular, I have a question about the reproductive rights bill that you referenced, the SHIELD law that was updated in June, and also there are two other health care bills that relate to privacy that are sitting on the governor's desk. What are your insights into that? Some people say, oh, well, the legislature needs to deliver them to the governor. What is the real reason, and is there anything that we can do to speed that along? Because there was a big New York Times article that showed up in the print edition about the interstate battle on abortion medication, especially highlighting Texas and New York. What can we do, and what are your insights?
So first about the, yesterday the Attorney General intervened in the lawsuit by the Texas Attorney General against the clerk of this county upstate who refused to record the judgment against the doctor, one of 5 that we work with in enacting this bill. She intervened to defend the constitutionality, and I just have to give her credit because she's really been quite fearless, and that's why they're fighting her so hard. So that's going on, and the Texas versus New York, ultimately that the constitutionality of our SHIELD law is going to get before the Supreme Court, which we knew at the time we enacted it, and we did some others. Here's how it works with the bills we pass. It is true, they do not sit on the governor's desk. They sit in the Senate and Assembly until she asks for them. So she has to ask for the bills. Unfortunately, it's a sort of a broken system. We can push her to ask for the bills, and so that's what the advocates should do. They should ask her to ask for these bills so that they can be signed more promptly. I have a lot of bills, I didn't even go through them, that passed both houses that are waiting to be signed. I would say sometimes on December 31st at midnight they call you and tell you they vetoed your bill. So I don't want that to happen, so we need to push her to ask for the bills.
Any other questions?
This is partially a comment and partially a question. Home insurance has gotten to be particularly expensive. Homeowners insurance. And it's particularly true in this area. I just had my homeowners insurance at renewal with a 16% increase, which is an affordability issue right there. And then the insurance company said, well, we have another plan, and you'll probably save money. Why don't you apply for it? So I picked up the phone, applied for it, and they said, we're not writing in this community. So there's in addition to Con Ed and all that other stuff, there's a real issue. And their point was, you're in the zip code. Even though you're miles away from the water, and you've never been affected by a flood or a windstorm or whatever, because you're in the zip code, we're not writing it. So
2 things on that. One, completely agree, and happy to say that 3 of my colleagues are doing a study to be released by December so that we can address it in the next session about the crisis in homeowners insurance affordability. It is a problem everywhere, and you identified here where they have this zip code analysis, which is sort of irrelevant to your situation. But I'm very happy that 3 of my colleagues, they're doing an in-depth study. And to be frank, it's also because the agencies are not aggressive enough in pushing back against these requests. So just in New Jersey, the Democrat running for governor said that on day 1, she's going to declare a state of emergency and have a moratorium on rate increases for utilities. I think right now we ought to have some moratoriums on increases for these kinds of costs. You need homeowners, and the last thing I would say on this is after Ida, I brought the commissioner of DFS, I think, to New Rochelle, because all these people who are not in a flood zone, who got their basements flooded and lost all their stuff, their homeowners said they would not cover it. because you're not in a flood zone. Well, no, I'm not in a flood zone, but we had Ida, and now my basement is flooded, and that's why I bought insurance. And I said that they should fight with these insurance companies and require them to cover the flood damage, which costs so many people in this community to redo their basements. Again, I don't think if I had my way, the agencies would be far more aggressive on behalf of consumers and not allow these prices to go up.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments, criticism?
On the subject of flooding, no surprise, I'm a flood victim. My house is flooded an awful lot over the years, but if FEMA insurance goes away on a federal, or FEMA goes away on a federal level, my homeowner's insurance, my flood insurance, as is most flood insurance, is backed by FEMA, is underwritten by FEMA. What's going to happen to that? Do you have any idea?
No, I don't know, and I think that's, we need to talk to George about, as they try to address some of these things. But very honestly, until there is a majority that represents people like you, it's hard to have an impact. I will look at whether there's anything specific out there, haven't seen it. But I think the FEMA issue is extremely critical for our community, extremely critical. Other questions, comments, criticism? Seriously, I'm quite used to it, yes. Sometimes people call and say, you should resign. I'm like, okay, I know you disagree.
So I just want to ask, we live in our sort of blue bubble down here, and I know upstate it gets read pretty quickly. So how are things in Albany? We hear about such discourse in Washington, and how are you dealing with your Republican colleagues?
Well, for all the criticisms of Albany, it's infinitely more functional than Washington. It really is. Now, we don't have a supermajority of Democrats in the Senate. We have a majority, and they have a supermajority in the Assembly. I particularly go out of my way to work with my Republican colleagues on school issues. I don't think it's a kid's problem whether their senator is a Republican and their school didn't get enough money, or the parents don't feel like it. So I have worked very closely with a number of my Republican colleagues. Some schools are in particular problems for various reasons, like somebody won the lotto and it made the income level of that community escalate so high that they lost all their foundation. Seriously, that is so unfair. But it happened to be a Republican district. So we tried to deal with that. Some of these, these kind of aberrational things happen. So I work well with most of my Republican colleagues, particularly on education issues, and I have a very cordial committee that has not deteriorated into what some other things have. I think, not to be unduly, the governor's race will be a sort of a proxy for how someone can try to be a moderate Democrat and win the whole state. And but I would say Washington is, and then having talked to George quite regularly, it is so dysfunctional and not productive from a governmental sense of point of view. Example, when people in our community get taken by ICE, and that's happened, like we had an Albanian guy just picked up, his wife didn't know what happened, it is difficult for the Democrats to get a lot of information from ICE, like where is the guy, can he have his phone, can his wife call him, blah, 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 just regular, normal human things that, in having been around a long time in most governments, including with Republican governors and other presidents, any Congress member could get. It's harder for the Democrats to get this information than it is for Republican Congress members. And I think that's the kind of thing that really offends me. Our job is to work together once we're elected, and we do. I certainly do. I have a number of Republican colleagues who run the communities that I represent. I was in Bronxville last night. Mary Marvin is the mayor. I've worked very closely with her. So I think it's quite unfortunate in the federal administration, Democratic Congress members are not given the access to the information. But in the state, I would say on balance, in the world of politics, it's all that. But in the governing world, it's better, much better. Any other comments, question? No?
I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Comment on the New York City race.
Hold on. Well, I have generally made it my business not to interfere in New York City politics, especially this year. No, I really don't. Like, even on New York City school issues, we have a separate chair. Senator John Lewis used to be comptroller of the city of New York, and I try not to intervene in New York City school issues about which I care deeply, but in New York City politics, I have stayed out of it. I do represent Yonkers, but I do not represent New York City, and only a little piece. Any other? Yes.
I see, thank you. Hi, my name's David Ansel. I'm with Save the Sound, and our office is just down the street. I just wanted to kind of amplify a couple things you were saying, and keep badgering you about my issues, which is clean water. Even with all the federal cutbacks, New York State does provide funding for clean water, and I know everyone's been affected by flooding and worried about flooding, but it's also a clean water issue when we get these floods and all the stormwater management infrastructure that we need and wastewater management infrastructure that we need. New York State does have specific funds, including the Bond Act and other programs that get in the budget every year. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, and of course Shelley and Steve know all this, and they fight so hard to get us that money, but just want to make sure everybody understands that, and that we really need to work hard to protect those investments. Thank you.
And Steve deserves the credit for this. I was in the assembly with Steve when he first came up with the idea of the Clean Water Fund, of making it a big deal. He has single-handedly allowed the entire state to have investment in clean water, and recognizing long before the worst of the floods how important it was. So he's not here, but I really want to acknowledge his leadership on that. He's been fantastic. But we are working on our next projects. We'll keep it up. But I know what our leadership will say to us. Do not have unreasonable expectations about next year. And so I just think we have to be honest about how challenging it's going to be for the state. People come and legitimately need and want money for very important things, and we're not going to be able to do them all. I hope capital is always different, and so that's a capital request. Capital versus operating capital is easier for the state to access, and I hope that we continue to fund it well.
Still have the Bond Act.
Yes, and we have the Bond Act funding. Yes.
Very simply, can you fill us in on the Con Ed fight?
Yes.
Con Ed.
So the Con Ed proceeding before the Public Service Commission, I have not intervened in that one because I wanted to be able to continue to criticize Con Ed and not sign off on any deal, which is, if you're a party, generally you have to agree to the settlement. They are apparently in settlement negotiations. I don't know what the numbers will be. So the parties that have intervened, all the towns, villages, basically in cities of Westchester, the county Board of Legislators have intervened. They've hired a lawyer, expert in utility regulation. PULP, the Public Utility Law Project that we work very closely with, has intervened. 3 of my assembly colleagues, they have demanded information back and forth, and they are now in the process of having some kind of negotiations. I suspect the decision will be before the end of the year about what the rate is. I am hopeful the governor says to the Public Service Commission, do not do what you just did for the last utility that they did upstate, where they granted such a large increase that there is a movement to overrule the Public Service Commission by the legislature. So I hope she really puts her foot down. I've had a big public fight with the Public Service Commission. There's no one there who represents consumers and ratepayers, and it is very much, if you don't know the vocabulary of how rates are set and the process, you're really difficult to have a voice. But that being said, we have had 2 public hearings here. Credit to Ken Jenkins, who fought for us to have hearings here in Westchester. I did too, but they don't pay any attention to me because I'm outspoken about their terribleness. And we got 2 public hearings, which were very important. We've had lots of comments. We've had all these interveners. We need people to write the Public Service Commission online and just say they oppose the rate increase. They count how many comments there are. So I encourage you to do that. If you don't, I think most people get either my email newsletter or print newsletter. I'm trying to give the specifics of how you do that because they are going to count. The other thing is the City of New York is a party. The City of New York, it appears that we are paying for a good deal of the infrastructure investment Con Ed makes in New York City because we're in the same region and we're paying the price for that. But we're also paying for their salaries, their lobbying costs, many of their costs, which I don't believe we as ratepayers, and that's one of my bills. It says if the person makes over $250,000, God bless them, but we should only pay what the governor makes. After that, let the shareholders pay their salary, because some of them they've had a very good rate of return.
One more question.
Hi, I'm Larry Thal with the local summit. Question, there was money, $1 trillion dedicated to infrastructure in the bipartisan, the federal bill, bipartisan infrastructure act, and the budget, inflation. Now my question is any of it is any of that money still available, or is it all spoken for?
He's talking about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that when Biden was president was passed. I don't think that the money, even if it's available, is available. So in other words, the Rescission Act, which Trump is doing, which allows them to claw back money that that Congress actually appropriated. So that's in addition to the big bill, allows the president to take back money that Congress appropriated. So I suspect if there's money, particularly because it was a Biden thing, that the money is no longer available. And I certainly, for example, I've been involved with the electrification of school bus movement, and there was money there for districts to invest in infrastructure and buy buses and stuff. That's no longer available.
So there are any projects that are almost done but can't be completed?
I don't know the answer to that. It's more of a federal answer, but I can try to find out. I saw the look.
I want to thank Senator Mayer. I want to thank Shelley for coming here today. We appreciate not only your